Yeah, so there's been a pretty interesting development in the sort of pharma industry this week. So if you were wondering why your pharma stocks had, like I was, suddenly jumped up in price, and then you sort of like scrambling around thinking, well, I don't think it was earnings, and I haven't seen any drug releases or this and the other, and there's nothing in the RNS. I think it's got a little bit about to do with this kind of deal that we've seen in America, and I think it's kind of an example of how like a single news story at one company can kind of like ripple along to other companies in that sector. Um, the big news that's been driving the positive sentiment was that Pfizer and the US government have come to an agreement, I guess, with Trump's administration to lower the price of certain prescription drugs for the US government's Medicaid program. The company has agreed essentially most favored nation pricing, which means the US government will pay prices essentially at least as low or the equivalent of those paid in other developed countries. So it wasn't just a simple negotiation. Pfizer didn't just come up with this idea, or Trump didn't approach them, or whoever, Kennedy didn't approach them, mainly because you probably wouldn't be able to understand him. But it's basically under the threat of new tariffs on drug imports, which could have been pretty devastating to these outside of the industry importing in pharma companies. So I think the deal is seen as a way for these major pharma companies to get ahead, potentially the much harsher government regulations that were imposed. And it's a proactive step that I think has removed some of the uncertainty. And obviously, that's given investors in these a little bit more confidence. I don't know if you've looked at the pharma company, a lot of them outside of the Eli Lillys of this world, but even including the Eli Lillys, have had pretty bad years, sort of year and halves kind of thing. So I think that's kind of the overarching story. But I've had a look at the deal, Steve, and I actually think it's really good for investors as well. And that's probably going to sound strange because you would assume that most of the money is made in America, considering they have to pay about £8,000 for insulin and we pay 6p. But I don't think it's actually going to affect anything that much. So Trump and the administration has sort of touted this as a major step towards lowering drug costs. And I think the reality is that the average consumer's effect on them is going to be less impactful. A government official I saw that spoke to a number of news organisations said that the discount prices are only going to be available to patients who aren't using their health insurance. And even then, the price could still be too high because it's based on the already inflated list prices of the drugs, not the selling price or the drug price minus rebate. So a person with health insurance in the US is probably still going to pay less than somebody who doesn't. So they're going to be out of pocket essentially at the pharmacy bench again. Assistant professor at Harvard Medical School, Amit Sapatwari. Oh, I've butchered that. She was on again on a number of news outlets, but essentially a specialist in pharmaceutical policy, said, I think it's more underwhelming than what's been touted. I think it's more window dressing than the transformational sort of reforms that are needed to provide relief to Americans struggling with high prices. Pfizer CEO, he was praised by the Trump administration for being the first of the companies to strike the deal. In addition to the pricing pledge, he also committed to launching new drugs in the US at the same prices of the developed countries, made a public promise to invest $70 billion in US manufacturing facilities, which was a major first for Trump's sort of America First policies. And Robert F. Kennedy said, set a new standard for corporate responsibility. So yeah, since this announcement came through, I think this noticeable uptrend in many of the big pharma stocks. The deal seems to have reassured investors that the government is open to striking an agreement rather than punishing. There was an idea that Kennedy would be really hostile to these pharma companies, and that doesn't seem to be it doesn't seem to be as much of the case as it was before. But yeah, wave of optimism across the entire sector. We've seen share prices climb. Pfizer was up 5, Merck up 4, Johnson & Johnson up 3, Amgen up 4, Sartorius, which is an equipment supplier, obviously getting excited because all of these companies are saying we're going to build manufacturing facilities in the US, all this money going to be thrown at it. that looks like it's the way to get Trump on side, is to say, look, we'll give you this deal and we'll spend this, which just makes companies like Sartorius prime position to picks and shovels the way out of this. But yeah, Pfizer are not the only ones who've said that they're going to make these sort of pledges to increase domestic manufacturing in the US. I think it's a clear signal that the industry is responding to administration's push to bring production home. And obviously that's just going to benefit the sector fairly broadly, especially the equipment suppliers. So yes, I don't think it's a deal. A sort of game changer for American consumers. I think it's going to end up being much of a muchness. Just so you know, Steve, it's going to be called Trump RX because they can't do anything without putting Trump's name in it. But yes, I think it's what he has done, Trump, and to give him some credit, I think he's fundamentally changed the conversation around drug pricing in the US. I think that's going to have a real and sort of positive impact on investor confidence in the sector. And also there's an opportunity for people to build on this deal and maybe eventually improve prices for the US. So I think the administration, who apparently are hounding pharma companies every sort of half, 2 times a day, halfway through the day, end of the day, hounding these pharma companies to follow suit. They deserve some credit for what they are doing here. But we'll see exactly what the impact is on people who don't have health insurance in the future. But yeah, I'm skeptical about how I think I think the administration is being played. Is how I'm going to say it. I think the pharma companies are being very smart here. They need to build manufacturing facilities anywhere. They'll build them in the US. They'll get rid of the tariffs, and they'll say, "Look, here's your most favored nation prices on these basis that that it's been explained to us. That's how it's going to happen." And it's not going to change anything other than remove the tariffs, which is a win-win for the pharma industry. So I think that's why prices are going up, because I think the pharma industry have sneakily won the debate here. But we'll see how it plays out, Steve.
Yeah, interesting. It'll be difficult, one imagines, for anyone to kind of put back that now shift to most favoured nation status. It'll be difficult for any future politician on either side to say we should start paying more for drugs, having kind of got that through one way or another. And that's kind of one of the things that I see here as potentially a long-term point of interest for pharma companies in general. The market took this very well. You and I were both looking at Sartorius up, and I was sort of looking elsewhere in the sector and seeing quite a bit of it going higher one way or another. Danaher is a big-ish winner. That's another equipment and kind of consumables a little bit supplier to this space. That's up 16% this week. Croda in the UK, which has had a tough time of its life sciences division since the end of the pandemic, and you might think they were facing they've gone from unusually strong demand to now unusually weak demand, and they're now up 5% or so. So my decision to not buy them entirely vindicated. Maybe they'll cover their dividend in the near future. I was looking at healthcare as a sector, and I mean it's one of the things I kind of associate with the change in administration has been a kind of suspicion of big pharma, and I think that's kind of justified. But the healthcare part of the S&P 500 has actually been okay. It's kind of been a very tale of two cities over there. You've had some companies that have done very, very well, either ones that are busy producing GLP-1s or ones that are not producing any drugs at all and are producing things like robotic surgery equipment, or better yet, being CVS and kind of getting taken over. But that thing's nearly doubled in the last year or so. But there's a lot to kind of go on with the healthcare space, and it's as a whole gone higher, but it's never been something that either of us have really kind of invaded into in a big way. We've only ever kind of moved around this area when we've thought there are obvious low valuation opportunities, I guess. Things have got kind of so cheap that we're both prepared to think, I definitely can't read this thing's pipeline, but I can see some clear reasons why we ought to consider buying this thing because it's Bristol Myers Squibb of 5 years ago. 5 years ago now, we were talking about that probably. Or even Pfizer more recently, or even in some cases, some other pharma companies here. And that'll be... that's where we sort of get to on these things. have no idea how I view this. I was in terms of who, whether this is a win for the administration or not. Trump RX is a terrible name. By the way, it's worse name than Obamacare, which I wasn't a massive fan of either. I dislike them sticking their own kind of names on these things. United Health, I saw, was largely steady this week. It wasn't a massive beneficiary, but the stock has come back a fair bit in the last month or so, which has been, um, I suppose, a good thing if you're Berkshire Hathaway and you bought a big lump of it when it fell quite a bit. But yeah, it's interesting to see things going higher here, Steve. I got tempted around the healthcare space, didn't really get into it in a sort of massive way, but I ended up kind of I got very close on Danaher and just couldn't quite bring myself to think it was the most attractive opportunity at any given moment, despite looking again even as late as last week and thinking it is quite low, but it also still looks kind of expensive.
Yeah, well, so I did. I bought Pfizer because I thought I think it was I bought it about the 25 range, something like that, and I ended up selling it about the sort of 26 kind of range because I just felt like there was going to be better opportunities out there. Um, and I think that's largely been the correct decision. Even with this big run up, they're only at $27 and sort of 6 cents now, so that's not a particularly huge jump. But my thoughts were that essentially the um, Kennedy and Trump were going to be fairly hostile to pharma companies. I didn't obviously know the tariffs were coming. I wasn't expecting that. I just thought that um, the FDA was going to tighten up on what it actually passes and what it doesn't, and there was going to be a general pushing of um, more sort of essential oily, sort of home carey kind of. Is that homeopathy? Is that the word for it? I'm not sure if that's the word.
That's
Witchcraft.
not essential. Well, that's a form of witchcraft. Yeah, that's not essential
Yeah.
oils and stuff. I think it's even worse than that. But yeah,
Yeah, drinking bleach and stuff. I thought that was more the kind of health advice that was going to be coming out of the US, and there's been a little bit of that. We can't lie, but I think with a lot of things, that Trump's been a lot less hostile to a lot of industries. The taco Trump sort of thing that he doesn't like is not really him chickening out. I think it's worked to a degree. The tariffs. If you think the tariffs were not there to actually tariff companies, but was to force them to essentially repatriate the manufacturing, it's hard to deny that that's what's actually happened. Now, whether that's a good industrial strategy or not is up for debate because I think a lot of the skilled jobs that are coming back to America, they're going to struggle to have the people to fill those skilled roles, especially if they're looking to tighten up their visa structure. That's going to make it very difficult because the people who may want to come over from, I don't know, let's say TSMC to help sort of bed in American manufacturing over here, they may struggle to get over. So yeah, it's a sort of a confusing bunch of policies for me. But I guess we'll just have to see, Steve. I think it's like all things. I think it's very difficult to get. There's a lot of moving parts. But kind of when you want to really like repatriate manufacturing like this, it's kind of like what I think about Labour's house building policy. You can shout about building millions and millions of homes a year. That's fine, but the system has got to be in place for the people to build them because we don't have enough builders or joiners or tradesmen. We don't really have enough supply, and the builders and tradesmen that we have are actually aging. They're um, young people are not coming to replace them. So it needs to be a sort of fully thought out industrial strategy where you create the wheels to be able to do that, and that's kind of what I think Trump's policy where it's kind of falling flat is that he's done an excellent job of repatriating manufacturing, but I don't see the policies there that are like, if you just slam a 70 billion facility in Alabama to manufacture chips, that doesn't mean there's going to be people there who know how to do the job. Is the university even teaching anything to do with semiconductors? Do you know what I mean? It just seems to be I hate the phrase, but I'm going to use it, but there seems to be a little bit of a lack of joined up thinking in policy. And but I think it's too early really to see what's going to happen, because obviously these facilities will take years to build. So I think it's a case of let's see. But I think he deserves credit for the repatriation, Steve. I think that's been good policy.
Yeah, I agree with you. On the coherence of the system as a whole, I'm not sure. I don't mean that as a sly way of saying I don't really believe in it. I'm genuinely unsure in this situation. What I will say for Trump, though, is that I haven't read The Art of the Deal, by the way, and I have no intention of reading it either. But he is a deal making guy. Throughout his career before being president and so on, he's someone who likes to do deals and negotiations and so on. And it is a feature of negotiating that a lot of, especially if you're doing it on a kind of grand stage like that, you can't necessarily just say what your kind of stated preferred outcome is. Otherwise, you end up getting negotiated away from it one way or another. And whether this is a kind of plan to start off by threatening one thing that you'll never go through on and end up somewhere to where you were in fact thinking you would want to be anyway, it's impossible to disprove that convincingly. I've seen several people having a go. I'm not sure. I mean, so there's one camp that says he's very obviously playing four-dimensional chess, and another one that says he very obviously doesn't know what he's doing. And I don't think either of those is very obvious to my mind. I think it could be a smart plan that kind of you can't actually tell people about, because if you tell people about it, then you end up with it not working. Or it could just be kind of confused thinking that ultimately lands somewhere where he didn't want it to and he's lost control and trying to get hold of the thing as best he can. Truth might be somewhere in the middle. Might be down either end, to be honest. But I take your thought here, though, that some things that Trump wanted to happen do appear to be happening, and they do appear to be happening as a result of things that Trump has done, not just by accident. Equally, though, claiming credit for things that is not necessarily attributable to him is well, one of his key political skills, I guess. You've been watching a segment from the Playing FTSE show, brought to you in association with our favourite broker, Trading 212. For the full version of the show, check us out on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you open a new account with Trading 212 using the link in the description, there's a free fractional share in it for you. Just make sure that you use the code FTSE when you sign up. Terms and conditions apply, and do remember that when investing, your capital is at risk.